We assume kids know things, but they really don't. In order for them to make good decisions, we have to give them good information.
My name is Victor DiNoble. I'm a scientist. My specialty is drug addiction, but I don't work with people. I work with animals. I'm here today to tell you a story, but the story I'm about to tell you, it begins 29 years ago. Every single one of us in this room, we are born with an area of the brain that recognizes drugs. Once a drug is in your blood and my blood, our brain will slowly begin to change. It has absolutely no choice. You will not be addicted to the drug the first time you use it. That's not going to happen. It's a process. And I like to think of the process as a light switch. You know, when I was pushing my light switch up, it moved, and it didn't go on, and it moved a little more, it didn't go on, then it moved a little more, and then all of a sudden, click. My lights went on. That's what drug addiction is. Every time we use a drug, the light switch, our brain gets changed just a little bit. And we keep using it, using it, using it. At one point, bam, it is going to click.
I give them information which helps them defend their decision to say, no, I'm not going to change my brain.
All the way in the back, young lady. Did our cigarette ever get made? No. There is no safe cigarette. 30 years ago, I thought we could do it. But I was young, and I was wrong. I was wrong. Today, 30 years later, I know there is no such thing as a safe tobacco product. It's not possible to be made.
I never tell kids what to do. I don't say don't or you shouldn't.
You know, I've heard people say, oh, yeah, I became a drug addict. Why? Well, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm black, I'm white, I'm male, I'm female, I'm rich, I'm poor, I had too many parents, I had no parents. Those are all the explanations of why people take and use a drug. But you know what the real decision is? Your choice.
They may only be kids, but they are still responsible for their own lives. If you get one kid, just one, not to smoke, you've affected everybody who's in that kid's life. You've affected their spouse and their kids and their parents and all their friends. 25 years from now, their friends aren't going to be sitting in a hospital waiting for a diagnosis of cancer. They're not going to be sitting in a hospital finding out that this person now has emphysema and can't breathe. So it's not one life. You've changed dozens and dozens of lives.
Eu quero convidar vocês agora para assistir esse documentário chamado Addiction Incorporated, ou seja, é um documentário que fala sobre o vício e, no caso específico, é o vício em nicotina. Esse documentário é um documentário que eu considero fantástico, gostaria muito mesmo que vocês assistissem. Eu acho que os adolescentes brasileiros têm todo o direito de receber a boa informação. Não há porquê os meninos e meninas lá nos Estados Unidos terem direito a assistir peças que possam ajudá-los a tomar melhores decisões e os nossos meninos e meninas brasileiros não o possam. Esse vídeo que eu estou convidando a vocês, sinceramente, a assistir, porque eu acredito que ele é muito interessante para o que nós vamos trabalhar sempre nessa página. Esse vídeo ele fala da cooptação da indústria do tabaco no final da década do final do século XX, em torno dos anos 80, anos 90 do século XX, a cooptação de cientistas para produzirem supostamente uma nicotina, um cigarro com uma nicotina que mantivesse o poder de gerar dependência química nos consumidores, mas que não matasse os consumidores. Então, os consumidores de tabaco mortos não dão dinheiro para a indústria. Então, a indústria queria mantê-los presos a ela, mas queria que a nicotina contida no cigarro, e que é a principal substância que faz o indivíduo ficar fumante e permanecer fumante, muitas vezes até o seu último suspiro, eles queriam criar uma nicotina análoga diferente. Então, esse documentário mostra a saga de alguns cientistas top de linha da ciência americana, pesquisadores extremamente importantes, e eu gostaria que vocês acompanhassem essa saga, sobretudo do Dr. Victor Denoble, que é quem abre esse nosso vídeo hoje e falando com as crianças, com os adolescentes americanos. Do mesmo jeito que o Dr. Denoble, a minha ideia, e isso vai ficar claro ao longo de todo esse tempo, é dar a vocês a possibilidade de terem informação. Não quero convencer vocês de nada e para mim, o importante é que vocês tomem as decisões que vocês tiverem que tomar, mas baseadas em informação, em conhecimento. Se vocês decidirem, ao longo dos seus anos de adolescência, decidirem iniciar, experimentar, saber qual é a do cigarro, é um direito de vocês, e eu não estou aqui para interferir nesse movimento de vocês. Mas saibam vocês que eu vou estar sempre aqui do lado de vocês, tentando ajudá-los a tomar a melhor decisão, e certamente a melhor decisão não é entrar em contato com a nicotina, que é uma droga extremamente poderosa e talvez seria bom para vocês não a experimentarem. Mas eu não quero me alongar, quero que vocês assistam esse documentário e, se possível, divulguem o documentário e divulguem essa nossa página Fumar Pra Quê, que vai estar aqui sempre ao lado de vocês, tentando ajudá-los. Qualquer dúvida, metam lá uma mensagem, tirem a dúvida com a gente, na medida do possível, se a gente souber, a gente responde, se não, a gente pesquisa e responde posteriormente, ou encaminha vocês para a dúvida de vocês para pessoas que saibam mais do que a gente. Parei de falar, quero que vocês assistam esse documentário, 35 minutos mais ou menos, vale a pena. Se vocês agora não tiverem com tempo ou com cabeça, assistam um pouco mais para trás, mais para frente, um outro dia, mas eu gostaria que vocês vissem o documentário inteiro. Um grande abraço e espero os comentários depois do que vocês acharam. Tamo junto.
I got a phone call from a guy named Bill Dunn. He said, I have a job for you. I said, who are you? He said, I work for Philip Morris and we make cigarettes. I said, this must be a mistake. Cigarettes? I do drug research. He said, I know what you do. I got a job for you. I met with Dr. Thomas Osdean. He was the director of science and technology for Philip Morris Research. He said, we got a problem. 138,000 people will have heart attacks and brain strokes every year caused by nicotine. I said, you guys make a product that you know kills people? He said, no, we don't kill anybody. Nicotine does, but we have a program.
Work had been going on for the 4 years that I had been there to develop substitutes for nicotine, called nicotine analogs.
They had a bunch of chemists, and these chemists were altering the nicotine molecule, but they had no way to test it. That's where I came in. My job was to identify a molecule that the rat's brain said, I like it, but the rat's heart had no problem with it.
Philip Morris recognized that it was in their interest to find products that were equally addictive to keep the profit machine going, but killed less people. Why would they care? Well, they might care to keep their smokers smoking longer. Dead people don't buy cigarettes.
So you're going to make a more addicting cigarette. And he said, no, that's not true. And I said, why else would you go there?
He was being given the opportunity to set up a world-class laboratory to study the behavioral pharmacology of nicotine, and that was a vital question to pursue.
In 1979, smoking didn't have the stigma that it has today. You could smoke on airplanes, you could smoke on TV, you could smoke anywhere. There was no anti-smoking movement. Here was a company that was willing to improve its product, and that improvement would result in better health. I thought this was the greatest company in the world.
There was an agreement among the cigarette companies not to do in-house animal studies, that we weren't going to do that kind of research.
Philip Morris and the industry as a whole, through evasions and lies over the years, they'd really painted themselves into a corner. They had told the public, they had told lawmakers, there was no proof of a causal connection between smoking and disease. They had said, no way is smoking and nicotine addictive. They couldn't be seen through their scientific researches as knowing better.
Why would a rat press a switch for nicotine? Rats don't have social pressures. Rats don't care about losing weight, and rats don't go to the movies. The only reason a rat would press a lever for nicotine is if his brain said, I like it. Drug addiction is a disease. Our job is to recreate that disease in our animals so we can look for drugs to treat it. So what we had to do was turn our rats into smokers. If they pressed the lever, they would get nicotine. Would a rat addict himself to nicotine? Nobody had ever done that before. The big question was dose. How much nicotine do you give a rat? We had no idea. But we know how much nicotine a person gets when they smoke a cigarette. We reduced the dose down proportionally to the rat's size dose. So it was like the rat was smoking a rat-sized cigarette. When the rat pressed the lever for the first time, the dose was wrong, and the reaction was violent. I needed to rethink this. I'd seen people smoke before, but I never really watched it. They puff and they puff. They puff. They smoke a cigarette over 7 minutes. We were giving our nicotine to the rats in 3 seconds. They made some adjustments in the pump so that the rats would get their nicotine periodically the same way people smoke a cigarette. Bam! The rats started pressing the switch. There's a neurotransmitter in your brain called dopamine. It makes you feel good. All drugs that are addicting change the way dopamine works. You can think of dopamine as a small stream in your brain. But when you're addicted to a drug, that stream becomes a river. And the only way for you to stay on that river is to keep using that drug. Day one, the rats had to switch 2 or 3 times. Day 5, they were hitting the switch 7 times a day. Day 10, it was about 20 times a day. We got to day 21. They were hitting the switch 90 times every single day. The rats were addicted.
When you do science, you do it for the public good, and you want it to be out there for other scientists to read it and understand it and to try to translate your findings into improved public health.
I wanted to publish this paper right away. There was a problem. Self-administration is the hallmark of drug addiction. We had to convince the company that this wasn't going to be a threat. We had to convince them that reinforcers aren't necessarily addictive. This wasn't going to be easy. These guys were sharp scientists. With our animal model, we could begin to do the work we were hired to do. I began testing these altered nicotine molecules. I was looking for a drug that the animal would want to give itself, but wouldn't cause heart problems. Nicotine is unique because it triggers what we call prostration. All the hair stands up and the breathing rate accelerates. We were testing for a drug that wouldn't affect the heart, and that's how we discovered our main contender, 2'-methyl nicotine. We saw prostration, but no hair stood up. The breathing rate was normal. It was what we were looking for.
Victor and I discussed how the results of his research could be used in, let's call it, safer or less harmful cigarette.
I proposed a design to the company, a cigarette that had tobacco, but no nicotine. We stuck our drug out here. A person would light up a cigarette and suck on it. Our drug would be in there. They would be addicted, but no heart disease. This was so exciting. It was unbelievable. Rats would practically work themselves to death for cocaine and heroin. But they wouldn't work very hard for nicotine. I began to wonder, why would smoking addict so many people? I got a list of all the chemicals in cigarette smoke. I had a hunch one of them might be an addictive drug.
We had been looking at nicotine as a chemical, the primary one that everybody knows about. Chemicals interact with receptors, and the way nicotine works, it interacts with a particular receptor. And so if I can make that receptor, let's say, more receptive to nicotine with another chemical, then it enhances the effect of the addiction or of the chemical.
Could acetaldehyde be an addictive drug? We didn't know, so we asked the rats.
Victor DeNoble found that when acetaldehyde is transmitted to the brain, it enhances and it strengthens the action of nicotine.
In our experiment, the rat pressed the lever 120 times for nicotine. For acetaldehyde, it went up to 240 times. But when you mix the two together, the results were even more exciting. They pressed the lever more than 540 times. The review board had questions and doubts, and nobody was recommending publication.
Sounds like we're into the
Doubtful
animal
on
testing
publishing
rat
studies
project.
performed on intact
We're getting
animals.
on thin ice.
But the paper was approved anyways for publication outside the company.
Once a month, we had what was called a Richmond meeting. The senior management from New York would come and sit around a table.
At the Richmond meeting, I presented both the nicotine analog data and the acetaldehyde data. Yes, we could use analogs to replace nicotine. And yes, we found a second drug in tobacco smoke that changed the way nicotine was perceived in the brain.
Absolutely.
If I change nicotine to a new chemical, it's a new drug, and I have to go through FDA clearance. But manipulating a reinforcer that could be put in cigarettes, like the acetaldehyde, is something that was already there. They already had acetaldehyde, so all we're doing is increasing something that's there. So that one, kind of lit up the room. Oh, that's an easy thing to do.
All they could do was talk about the acetaldehyde.
They realized the potential use of this combination.
And the entire program became focused on acetaldehyde.
From the company's point of view, they saw a means to get more bang for the buck.
If you have a way of manipulating nicotine and acetaldehyde, you have a way of optimizing ratios that people are going to like. You have a way of making it a maximally addictive product. Your sales are going to go through the roof. And if you're the only company that knows this information and then the only company that can use this information, the potential is just unbelievable.
Philip Morris would have been concerned about this acetaldehyde research because they were trying to market cigarettes as sort of a lifestyle product, something which people took that they enjoyed, but they were trying to stay away from the fact that they're drug marketers. And when you start saying, here we have animal models where rats self-administer nicotine the same way they do cocaine or other drugs of abuse, and if we add acetaldehyde, which is in smoke, and they self-administer it more, makes it more addictive, then it makes it pretty clear that what they're marketing is an addicting drug.
Jim told me I had to withdraw the paper. Well, what do you mean? He said, the paper, withdraw it. I said, no. He said, go downstairs and do it.
When Shep Pollack, the president of the company, came to visit our lab, that was a major event. He came with Fred Newman, the attorney that we had most contact with.
It was almost as if the rat was on cue, opened the box, and the rat's pressing the switch for nicotine. And he looked at it and he said, does that mean nicotine's addictive? And the lawyer, Fred Newman, jumps in between us and says, don't answer the question. I sent a letter withdrawing the paper. That was the worst scientific day of my entire life.
It was a Thursday afternoon, about 3 o'clock. We were working in the lab, wrapping up for the day.
Jim Charles asked us to his office. I thought I was being promoted again.
The first thing he said was, we don't do behavioral pharmacology anymore.
Go downstairs and kill your rats.
The studies will stop.
Turn over your keys.
The lab is closed.
Leave the building.
We had been deceived.
You're fired.
When we started working on the tobacco story at ABC, we were told that the tobacco companies were manipulating nicotine to addict smokers. And we said, this is sort of crazy, but if it's true, it's an important story. So we started digging into it, and we spent a year. We talked to more people than I can imagine. We did all kinds of research. We read through industry patents day after day. And the more we looked at it, the more we said, oh my God, this is unbelievable. On the eve of airing, the commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration sends out a letter that says for the first time the federal government is going to look at the tobacco industry and investigate the tobacco industry, something that had never happened before.
We didn't know what was going to be in the day one broadcast, but we knew it wasn't going to be a good story. So we got a bunch of the executives together in a big conference room on the executive floor to watch it. It was even worse than we thought it was going to be. It was devastating.
From these tobacco fields comes one of the world's most profitable and addictive substances.
I have never, ever, ever gotten a reaction like the one I did on day one. It was a feeding frenzy on the part of the media.
Our stock took a huge hit. There were calls from reporters, print, electronic. Regulators were calling for hearings. And we really were at a loss as to what to do.
I think what day one did that helped change the debate was they turned it into not just a story about are cigarettes dangerous, but that this company, this industry, was in fact selling a drug. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I mean, one could conclude that these people weren't that far removed from drug dealers. They were selling a drug that they knew was addictive, and they weren't telling the truth about it.
When Congressman Waxman got the letter from Dr. Kessler that made it clear FDA had been investigating this and had a lot of information, he decided to immediately schedule a hearing.
None of us realized that the tobacco industry was able to manipulate the nicotine to get people to smoke and to keep them smoking. And we wanted him to come in and give us this presentation.
They said, we're holding a hearing in 4 weeks, and we want to know what evidence existed. But we didn't even know where to begin.
Kessler knew that we were going to be testifying before Congress in 4 weeks. He looked in and around FDA for trained professional investigators.
I was working in my laboratory at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and they indicated they were from the FDA and wanted to ask some questions about my previous work at Philip Morris.
Paul Melee told us about the paper. I got instantly the significance of what I was seeing.
When you go to work for Philip Morris, you sign a secrecy agreement, and for the rest of your life, you're not allowed to divulge what you did there. Congressman Waxman called me the day before the press conference to give me a heads up. What he didn't tell me was that he was going to hold up the paper that I tried to publish in 1983.
The editor of the journal was notified by the Philip Morris researcher that the article was being withdrawn.
My heart just stopped. It was like, oh my God, how did they get this? And here it is on national TV.
We must hear directly from the chief executive officers. These individuals have been asked to appear before the subcommittee on April 14th, 1994.
Congressman Waxman, if these executives do not respond favorably to your invitation,
I expect them to be there.
We were very unsure whether they would agree to come. They had always refused before, and our plan was to hold the hearing whether they came or not, and we would simply have empty chairs.
We're going to present a rosy face, and they'll see that we're just people selling good old-fashioned American product. And we're going to make that case to the American people, and who better to do it?
I think the CEOs calculated that they had enough juice in Congress that somehow this would not be that bad, that they would not insult these fine, upstanding CEOs. Boy, I bet they wish they could change their mind on that one.
The meeting of the subcommittee will come to order. For the first time ever, the chief executive officers of our nation's tobacco companies are testifying together before the United States Congress. Imagine our nation's outrage if 2 fully loaded jumbo jets crashed each day, killing all aboard. Yet that's the same number of Americans that cigarettes kill every 24 hours. The truth is, nearly 500,000 Americans die every year as a result of tobacco. This is an astounding, almost incomprehensible statistic.
Most congressional hearings don't have a swearing in. It's very rare, in fact, for witnesses to have to raise their right hand and testify. This was clearly set up to force the CEOs to either tell the truth or to necessarily perjure themselves.
Nicotine addiction is something we now know, at least one tobacco company knew about, and I believe they all knew about it.
The information in Dr. DeNoble's paper became a cornerstone of the hearing and the questioning.
I'm going to go right down the row and ask each one a simple question. They're under oath. We'll see what their response is. First one.
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
I asked the second one.
Cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, just yes or no.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
It's not addictive. It's not addictive. Not addictive. Not addictive.
Mr. Horgan, did this group discuss the need to state clearly in the same words as you all did, in the same words that nicotine is not addictive?
That's absolutely outrageous.
What is outrageous?
That is outrageous for you to assume that we meet and talk about these issues. We are competitors, we're independent, we're fighting for survival in a legitimate marketplace.
It's very difficult for me to find you at this table characterizing anything as outrageous after 7 apparently intelligent people have stood here and told the American people, 250 million of which know better, that cigarettes are not addictive. What could be more ridiculous? So if we appear a little skeptical of your answers in other areas, you'll understand why.
We had no idea that it would be as intense and as hostile as it was. The anger among members of that committee was palpable.
Gentlemen, the subcommittee contacted Dr. DeNoble, Mr. Campbell, to ask his version of the events, and Dr. DeNoble informed this subcommittee that he would be unable to talk to us because it may be subject to a confidentiality agreement that he has with your company, Philip Morris.
We thought if Mike Sinar asked the question in public of Mr. Campbell, if he said no, he couldn't come in and testify. It was obvious that Philip Morris was trying to cover up what he might have to say.
Mr. Campbell, will you release Dr. DeNoble from his confidentiality agreement so that he can appear voluntarily before this subcommittee to tell us what really happened?
I don't know of the confidentiality agreement, so I'd have to have an investigation, but then I will answer.
Will you release Dr. DeNoble from any contractual arrangements that will allow him to voluntarily testify before this subcommittee?
Dr. DeNoble is quite on record in a
yes or
number
no?
of
Will
depositions.
you allow Dr. DeNoble to come forward?
I see no problem, and our people will discuss it with you.
That's not the question. Mr. Campbell, will you release him from that agreement?
Can I check with my counsel at this time?
I just want to know, you're the chairman of the board.
No, I'm not, sir, but I'm just the president, but...
Mr. Sinar,
Bill turned over his shoulder and looked at me, and I said, release him, waive the agreement.
You will do it, sure.
Thank you.
I should tell you, we knew his testimony was going to hurt the industry. I mean, it really undermined their credibility. He had done very, very sophisticated research on tobacco addiction, and he had done it before it was accepted that tobacco was addictive, and it had to stand up.
We met with Waxman's staff and Kessler's staff.
They knew more about self-administration than the vast majority of scientists. DeNoble and Melee had gotten the science right.
Once we walked in the front door, there were media people everywhere, and I was told that C-SPAN would be showing this live. There was no turning back.
Oh, yes, recognize him.
We're pleased to welcome you both to our subcommittee hearing today. You were both...
Victor DeNoble was the first whistleblower. I know a lot of people have talked about other whistleblowers, but he was the first one.
At that point, we gave a presentation to several members of New York corporate staff, had entertained questions, had lunch, and then were flown back that evening on the company jet.
What kind of questions were you asked at the New York briefing?
I was only asked one question.
What was that?
Why should I risk a billion-dollar industry on rats pressing a lever to get nicotine?
were these top management people?
Yes, they were.
Were you told a couple of weeks after the meeting that your lab was generating information that the company did not want generated inside the company?
We were told that the data we were generating and the types of studies that we were doing would not be favorable in that litigation.
Were you told the top management was looking at releasing you and your associate from employment and look at some other arrangement?
Yes, employ us as contract individuals.
Gentlemen, yield.
Be happy to yield.
We get to the record. Those options were to have you do the work, but not in-house.
That is correct.
Did they give you a reason?
If the work were removed from the company, connecting it back to the company would be more difficult to do than if it's being done right in the company itself.
Doctor, let me move on. What did you feel like on April 14th, 1994, as you watched the testimony of the 7 chief executives? What has this told you about the character and the trustworthiness of this industry?
It's difficult to watch those hearings and to feel good about what happened to us.
When Victor and Paul testified before Congress, it was the first time that anyone that was inside the industry that had that kind of detailed knowledge about the thinking and the research that was being done inside the largest tobacco company in the country. It was the first time someone like that came forward. And they came forward in this most public of settings, a congressional hearing, where they testified under oath what they knew. It was the first time anyone had seen that type of information. And I think that moment changed things.
Everyone was writing about tobacco. Everyone. They didn't know what to do. One after another, these CEOs moved to pursue other interests. Well, I was going to retire anyhow. Oh, I want to work on my golf game. I don't know what excuses they were giving, but they got them out.
The United States alleges that for the past 45 years, the companies that manufacture and sell tobacco have waged an intentional, coordinated campaign of fraud and deceit.
The federal RICO lawsuit was the largest lawsuit in the history of the Department of Justice.
The RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It was a statute that was passed, I think it was in 1971, and at the time that it was enacted, it was to deal with organized crime.
Judge Kessler issued a withering encyclopedic ruling finding the tobacco companies guilty of all manner of lies and evasions and fraud against the public in such areas as lying about the health consequences of smoking over a period of decades, lying about the addictiveness of smoking, manipulating cigarettes so that they would be more addictive, marketing cigarettes to underage youth, misusing the legal system through the strategies of their lawyers.
They ended up being adjudicated as racketeers. That's not exactly the kind of thing you want to put on your sign.
Now that the Supreme Court has upheld Judge Kessler's decision, you can say with finality that the tobacco industry has joined the ranks of organized crime. And it's a lot closer to the Gambinos than it is to Kellogg's.
When the Family Smoking Prevention and Tobacco Control Act passes Congress, and once the president signs it, it will put in place the FDA program that Henry Waxman, David Kessler, and many others began working on in the mid-1990s.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President and Vice President of the United States.
The legislation I'm signing today represents change that's been decades in the making. Since at least the middle of the last century,
the standard it sets is the FDA is to take action appropriate for the protection of public health. What that means, in the hands of the right government, is the power to do whatever is necessary to reduce to the maximum extent possible the number of people who die from using tobacco.
Thank you very much. Let's go sign the bill.
Imagine a world where the only cigarettes that kids were capable of experimenting with were non-addictive, so that experimentation wouldn't lead to regular smoking, addiction, and premature death. FDA now has the tool to change the tobacco marketplace so that the only cigarettes that can be there are those that can't create and sustain addiction.
There you go.
The agency and the industry are really at a crossroads. The agency has to develop the new rules and regulations that will govern this industry. The industry has to be prepared to step up and comply with the letter and the spirit of the new rules and the new regulations. If the death and the disease caused by smoking is reduced, that's in everybody's best interest.
They can reduce nicotine levels to the point where cigarettes are no longer addictive. But time will tell if they will actually do that.
People have their vices. People want to take chances. You take chances when you're young. That's what's so dangerous about cigarettes. Because when you're young, hey, you're going to live forever. Okay, I'll do it. It's cool. And people do it. There will always be that. There will always be the teenager in a car trying to drive 100 miles an hour because he thinks he's never going to die. And there will always be that teenager smoking cigarettes who think, this is never going to kill me.
We assume kids know things, but they really don't. In order for them to make good decisions, we have to give them good information.
My name is Victor DeNoble. I'm a scientist. My specialty is drug addiction, but I don't work with people. I work with animals. I'm here today to tell you a story, but the story I'm about to tell you, it begins 29 years ago. Every single one of us in this room, we are born with an area of the brain that recognizes drugs. Once a drug is in your blood and my blood, our brain will slowly begin to change. It has absolutely no choice. You will not be addicted to the drug the first time you use it. That's not going to happen. It's a process. And I like to think of the process as a light switch. You know, when I was pushing my light switch up, it moved, and it didn't go on, and it moved a little more, it didn't go on, then it moved a little more, and then all of a sudden, click. My lights went on. That's what drug addiction is. Every time we use a drug, the light switch, our brain gets changed just a little bit. And we keep using it, using it, using it. At one point, bam, it is going to click.
I give them information which helps them defend their decision to say, no, I'm not going to change my brain.
All the way in the back, young lady. Did our cigarette ever get made? No. There is no safe cigarette. 30 years ago, I thought we could do it. But I was young, and I was wrong. I was wrong. Today, 30 years later, I know there is no such thing as a safe tobacco product. It's not possible to be made.
I never tell kids what to do. I don't say don't or you shouldn't.
You know, I've heard people say, oh, yeah, I became a drug addict. Why? Well, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm black, I'm white, I'm male, I'm female, I'm rich, I'm poor, I had too many parents, I had no parents. Those are all the explanations of why people take and use a drug. But you know what the real decision is? Your choice.
They may only be kids, but they are still responsible for their own lives. If you get one kid, just one, not to smoke, you've affected everybody who's in that kid's life. You've affected their spouse and their kids and their parents and all their friends. 25 years from now, their friends aren't going to be sitting in a hospital waiting for a diagnosis of cancer. They're not going to be sitting in a hospital finding out that this person now has emphysema and can't breathe. So it's not one life. You've changed dozens and dozens of lives. See you guys. That's what keeps me going.